In more than 40 years on this bench, I have learned that the law is not really about paper. It is not about codes, stamps, seals, or stiff words in thick books. It is about people. It is about fear, pride, shame, grief, and hope, all walking into one room at the same time and asking to be heard. I thought I had seen everything a courtroom could show me. I thought I had heard every excuse money could buy and every sorrow hardship could create. But then one Tuesday morning, a young man with a famous last name said something so cold, so small, so cruel that it broke something inside me for a moment, and I still get tears in my eyes when I think about the woman he said it to. You enjoying this story so far? Then do me a huge favor right now and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next restored something deep in me about justice, and I think it may do the same for you. There are days a judge remembers because of the law. Then there are days he remembers because of the soul. This was the second kind. This was the kind of day that stays with you when the courthouse is dark, when the papers are put away, when your tie is off and the house is quiet, and the coffee has gone cold in the kitchen. Let me tell you exactly what happened that day, because if I simply gave you the ending, you would miss the part that mattered most. You would miss the look on her face. You would miss the sound in that room after he said those words. And you would miss why I did what I did next. I was 82 years old that year. I had been on the bench since 1985. You sit where I sit long enough and you stop being surprised by people's mistakes. What still surprises you is their character. Pressure reveals it. Power reveals it. Shame reveals it. And when somebody thinks they are too rich, too connected, or too important to answer for what they did, that is when character shows itself like a bright light in a dark room. That morning, I was not looking for a lesson. I was just doing what I have done for decades. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. the way I always do, before the city fully finds its voice, before the phones start ringing, before excuses begin marching through the door. My wife Joyce was already awake. After 48 years of marriage, you learn the quiet rhythms of a person better than you know your own. She was in the kitchen in her blue robe, the one she says is too old to throw away and too comfortable to replace. The little radio by the window was low. A weatherman was talking about light rain over Providence and wind coming off the bay. I like my coffee strong and black. No sugar, no cream. My father used to say if coffee needs hiding, it is not coffee. So I made it the way I always do in the old stainless steel pot that hisses just a little before it settles down. The smell filled the kitchen. Dark, bitter, honest. Joyce looked at me over her glasses and said, "Big day?" I smiled and said, "Every day is big in court." She laughed softly. She has heard me say that for years, and she still lets me say it like it is new. That is part of love, too, not correcting every old line, letting a person be himself. I stood by the sink and watched the rain make little lines on the glass. I thought about my father, as I often do in the morning. He came to this country from Italy with $8 in his pocket and calluses on his hands. He worked construction. He carried boards, mixed cement, climbed in heat and cold, and came home tired in a way some people today would not even understand. But he carried dignity with that tiredness. He used to tell me, "Francesco, when life gives you a little power, that is not permission to act big. That is a test. Use it wisely. Use it with mercy." That sentence has never left me. My father is gone now, but his voice still sits in the chair across from me on hard days. I still hear him, especially on days when anger would be easy, especially on days when the law gives you the right to do something, but wisdom asks you to do something better. By 6:15 a.m. I had my second cup. By 6:40 I was dressed, dark suit, white shirt, conservative tie, the kind of clothes a judge wears not because they are exciting, but because they should not be. The robe does the talking later. I kissed Joyce on the cheek. She said, "Be kind, but don't let anyone play games." That is my wife. Gentle as rain, sharp as a tack. The drive into Providence was wet and gray that morning. I took my usual route past Benefit Street, then down toward the courthouse. The wipers kept time. Left, right, left, right. The old church steeples stood against the low sky. Delivery trucks were already out. A school bus hissed to a stop on Westminster Street. A man in a yellow rain jacket pushed a cart of flowers under an awning. I have always loved cities in the morning. They feel honest then, not polished, not pretending, just people beginning again. I got to the courthouse at 8:15 a.m. sharp, like always. Routine matters in a courtroom. It sets a tone, not just for others, for me. The front hallway smelled faintly of floor wax and damp wool coats. Courtroom 3B is not grand. It is modest. Wooden benches, a seal on the wall, the American flag to one side, the Rhode Island flag to the other. A clerk's desk worn smooth at the edges. A few places where old wood has been touched by nervous hands for years. I've always liked that about it. Real justice does not need marble columns. It needs attention. It needs patience. It needs somebody willing to listen. My clerk, Christina, was already there with the files stacked in neat order. Christina had worked with me for 23 years. She knew my moods better than most people know the weather. She could tell by the way I set down my briefcase whether I needed coffee, silence, or the first joke of the day. She was efficient, kind, and steady. I have always believed a good courtroom clerk is one of the great unrecognized blessings in public life. She looked up and said, "Good morning, Judge." "Morning, Christina." She handed me the day's docket and said, "Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. First call at 9:01 a.m. Full room. Parking violations, 2 noise complaints, 1 registration matter, 1 failure to appear, and 1 case that has already had more phone calls than it deserves." I took the top file and looked at her over my glasses. "That's so?" She lowered her voice. At 8:32 a.m., somebody from Senator Richard Whitmore's office called asking who was presiding. At 8:41 a.m., someone else called asking whether the file could be resolved administratively. They did not say that in so many words, but that is what they meant. I remember thinking to myself, here we go. I did not even open that file yet. I just set it aside and said, "No case gets a private door in this courtroom." Christina gave one quick nod. She had heard me say versions of that before, too. Before the room filled, I sat for a moment in the quiet and looked at the empty benches. I have said this for years because I believe it with all my heart. Every person who walks through that door has a story, and that story matters. Some stories explain, some stories warn, some stories break your heart, some stories make you angry, but if you forget that people are walking in with whole lives behind them, then you should not be wearing the robe. By 8:54 a.m., the room was filling. Lawyers with leather folders, defendants with worried eyes, people missing work, elderly folks leaning on canes, young people trying to look calm and failing, a mother with a toddler, 2 off-duty police officers, 3 law students in the back row taking notes like the world depended on it. All kinds, all classes, all stories. That is what a courtroom really is. One of the last places in America where rich and poor still have to sit on the same benches and wait their turn. We started on time, we always did. The first case was a young delivery driver from Cranston who had 3 unpaid parking tickets because he was sleeping in his van between shifts and never got the mail. I was firm, but I gave him a payment plan and a chance to clear his record. The second was an older woman, 71 years old, named Mrs. Levinson, who parked in a hydrant zone because her husband with Parkinson's had fallen in the pharmacy parking lot on Atwells Avenue. You can tell when someone is lying to save money and when someone is telling the truth because life cornered them. I waived the penalty and told her to drive carefully. She cried. Then she apologized for crying. That happens a lot in court. People apologize for being human. At 9:47 a.m., a man in a Red Sox jacket argued with me for 6 straight minutes about a muffler ticket as if it were a constitutional crisis. At 10:03 a.m., I find a landlord from Federal Hill who thought I didn't know was a magic phrase. At 10:19 a.m., I dismissed a citation for a school nurse who had parked 5 inches over a line while rushing back to a diabetic child. Compassion is not softness. It is discernment. It is seeing the difference between carelessness and burden. Then around 10:31 a.m., while another case was being called, I looked up and saw him. You know the type. Before he says a word, the room tells you who he thinks he is. Marcus Whitmore III was sitting in the second row near counsel table, 24 years old. Navy blue Brioni suit so fine it almost looked poured onto him. I learned later it cost around $15,000. Gucci loafers, polished to a mirror shine. a rose gold Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, worth more than many people's cars, maybe more than some people's yearly rent, a Hermes belt, a Louis Vuitton briefcase placed carefully at his feet, pristine, like it had never seen an actual day of work. His hair had that expensive, messy look that takes real money to make look accidental. He kept checking his phone, then checking himself in the black screen of the phone, then leaning back with that lazy little half smile some young men wear when they think the world is a doorman. Next to him sat his lawyer, Charles Pembroke, a polished corporate attorney in a charcoal suit, silver tie, and worried expression. Good lawyer, fast mind, very expensive. Behind them in the gallery sat two men I took to be family handlers or advisors, the kind who whisper into phones and never fully relax. One woman in pearls kept glancing toward the door. Nobody in their group looked afraid, annoyed, yes, offended at being there, absolutely, but afraid, not yet. Then I looked farther back to the left side of the room and I saw Rita Alvarez. She sat alone. She was 52 years old then. Senior EMT at Rhode Island Hospital, 23 years of service. Her dark blue uniform was clean but wrinkled from a long night. There was a faint coffee stain near the pocket. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, dark circles under her eyes, no lawyer, no assistant, no one carrying her bag. Just a folder in both hands and that tired, upright posture I have seen in people who do not have the luxury of falling apart in public. She looked like she had come straight from a double shift, because she had. Later I learned she had worked from 7 p.m. the night before until 7 a.m. that morning, then slept for less than 90 minutes in her car in the hospital garage before coming to court. That detail stayed with me. It still does. I knew her face, not well, but enough. Back in 2021, she had come into my courtroom as a witness in a case involving an overdose call on Elmwood Avenue. She spoke calmly, clearly, and with respect. Afterward, one of the officers, Sergeant Daniel Keene, badge number 1842, had said to me quietly, "Judge, Ms. Alvarez is good people." I remembered that. Judges remember character. We have to. At 10:44 a.m., Christina set the Whitmore file in front of me. The case number was 74321. Citation numbers PVD 1N1847, PVD 1N1848, and PVD 1N1849. Providence Municipal Code 23-17, standing in a marked emergency lane. Rhode Island General Laws 31-21-10, obstruction of emergency access. Secondary notation from hospital security. Attached photos, time logged. Complaining witness, Rita Alvarez. Incident location, ambulance receiving lane, Bay B2, Rhode Island Hospital, 593 Eddy Street, Providence. Date of incident, Saturday, October 11, 2025. Vehicle, bright orange Lamborghini Huracan, Rhode Island plate WTMR3. Duration of obstruction, 4 hours and 17 minutes. I sat back. 4 hours and 17 minutes in an ambulance bay. That was no mistake. At 10:47 a.m. I called the case. Marcus Whitmore III. He did not stand right away. He looked at his lawyer first, like standing was something staff usually handled. Then he rose slowly, one hand still on his phone. "Good morning," I said. He gave me a quick nod without warmth. "Put the phone away and pay attention," I said. A few people in the gallery looked up. They could already feel the temperature changing. His lawyer stepped in quickly. "Good morning, Your Honor. Charles Pembroke on behalf of Mr. Whitmore." Marcus slid the phone into his inside jacket pocket with a tiny sigh, like I had interrupted something important. I read the matter into the record. This case concerns alleged unlawful standing in a marked ambulance receiving zone at Rhode Island Hospital on October 11, 2025, beginning approximately 6:11 p.m. and continuing until 10:28 p.m., despite repeated security notices, staff requests, and posted emergency access restrictions. Additional allegations include obstruction of emergency operations affecting Rescue 4 intake and delay in patient transfer involving an elderly cardiac patient. Is that an accurate summary of the citations before the court, counsel? Pembroke cleared his throat. That is the allegation, Your Honor. I looked at Marcus. How do you plead? He shrugged. Actually shrugged. This whole thing is ridiculous. I waited. Silence is useful in court. It makes people hear themselves. Pembroke jumped in. Not guilty, Your Honor, Marcus muttered, just loud enough. I really do not think this requires a court appearance. I heard it. Everybody heard it. I leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, whether you think the court is required is not your decision. You're here, so we're going to do this properly. He gave that little smile again, the one that says I'm in the room but not under the roof. I turned to Rita. Ms. Alvarez, would you please come forward? She stood with her folder pressed to her chest. She walked with the stiffness of somebody whose back has lifted too many stretchers and whose feet have stood too many hours. When she got to the witness area, I asked if she needed a moment. She said no. Her voice was low and steady. Your Honor, I submitted everything in writing. I do not want to take up the court's time. I said, your story matters. Take the time. That is when she looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face that I know well. Not anger, worse than anger, weariness, the kind that comes when a person has already carried too much and then is asked to carry one more thing because somebody else thought rules were for little people. She gave her name for the record. Rita Elena Alvarez, age 52, senior EMT, Rhode Island Hospital Emergency Response Unit, 23 years with the department. I asked about the night in question. She opened her folder and said, I started my shift at 3:00 p.m. on Saturday. We were short 2 people. One called out sick and one had a family emergency. At 5:54 p.m. we got a radio notice that Bay B2 had been blocked by a private vehicle. Security had tagged it. They were trying to locate the owner. At 6:07 p.m. I went outside myself. It was a bright orange Lamborghini parked across the red-striped zone with the back end angled into the loading path. I approached the driver, who was getting out. I told him this was an ambulance bay and he needed to move immediately. Her hands were steady, but her voice got quieter. What did he say? I asked. She did not want to say it, I could tell. Some people do not like repeating ugly things. It makes them feel dirty again. She said, he looked at me and laughed. Then he said, send me the ticket and move on with your life. There was a soft murmur in the room. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the wall. Rita continued. I told him again politely that ambulances use that entrance every few minutes. He said, do you know who my uncle is? I said that did not matter. He said, it always matters. Then he walked away. I felt my throat tighten. I have heard thousands of stories on this bench. I have heard lies, bad luck, confusion, panic, carelessness. But something about contempt for working people cuts through every defense you build up as a judge. I sat back and let her keep going. She explained that security paged the vehicle owner at 6:18 p.m., 6:41 p.m., 7:05 p.m., and 7:42 p.m. Hospital security supervisor Lila Monroe, ID 77, left 2 written notices under the wiper. The car did not move. At 8:13 p.m., Rescue 4 came in carrying Arthur Donnelly, age 78, from Benefit Street, active cardiac distress, probable heart attack. Baby 2 was still blocked. The ambulance had to reverse, angle around a concrete bollard, and use Baby 1. The transfer took an extra 92 seconds from curb to doors. 92 seconds. If you are healthy, 92 seconds sounds small. If your heart is failing, 92 seconds is a country mile. Rita swallowed hard and said, the patient survived. But it was close. His pressure was dropping. We were moving fast. The extra maneuver should not have happened. I asked, did you speak to the defendant again that night? She nodded. At 9:36 p.m., he came out carrying gift bags and talking to 2 other men. I told him again he had to move the car. He looked at me like I was an insect. Then he said, everyone makes mistakes. I did not hurt anyone. That line sat in the air like smoke. She went on. At 10:28 p.m., the car was finally moved. I asked about her personal circumstances, not because pity changes law, but because context matters. She hesitated, then answered only because I asked. Her husband Miguel died of pancreatic cancer 2 years earlier, on August 3, 2023. Medical bills still being paid. 3 children, Sophia, 19, at CCRI. Daniel, 16, in high school. Lucia, 12, still sleeping with the hallway light on some nights since her father died. Rita worked EMT shifts and cleaned offices 3 nights a week in Warwick from 8 p.m. to midnight when she could manage it. She represented herself because she could not afford counsel. Then she said the line that almost undid me. Your Honor, I'm not here because I want money. I'm here because if people can block an ambulance bay for fun and nothing happens, then what are we even doing? There it was, the whole thing in one sentence. I looked at Marcus. Do you wish to respond? He let out a breath through his nose. This is being blown way out of proportion. Pembroke touched his arm, but Marcus kept going. I was there for a hospital donor event. There was confusion with valet. The sign placement was bad. It was not like I parked in the middle of an operating room. People are acting like I killed someone. You know what I've learned? Innocent people usually talk about what happened. Guilty people talk about how everyone else is reacting. I said, the testimony is that you were told repeatedly to move the vehicle. He lifted one shoulder again. I got a lot of people talking to me all night. And that means what? It means I was being pulled in different directions. Rita looked down, not because she was weak, because she had heard enough of this kind of language in life to know what it really means. It means your time matters and mine does not. Pembroke stepped forward with his smooth lawyer voice. Your Honor, my client acknowledges he should have handled the matter differently. He is prepared to resolve this in a constructive way. The Whitmore Family Foundation is willing to donate $25,000 to Rhode Island Hospital in recognition of the misunderstanding, without admitting liability. I remember feeling something hot surge through my chest at that moment. I did not show it on my face. A judge must not let anger drive the wheel. But inside, I was thinking, your client broke the law, obstructed emergency care, ignored a first responder, and your defense is that his family wrote a check. I have seen that move before. Dress the insult as generosity, wrap arrogance in philanthropy, and hope people clap because the ribbon is expensive. I said slowly, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your client parked a Lamborghini in an ambulance bay for 4 hours and 17 minutes, caused a documented delay in patient transfer, ignored repeated instructions to move, and your proposed remedy is a donation from family money. Pembroke said, we are simply trying to resolve this matter in a way that benefits the hospital. I said, that is not what this court is for. Marcus rolled his eyes, not huge, just enough. I caught it. Mr. Whitmore, I said, I suggest you stop performing for the room and start listening. He looked at me for the first time with a trace of irritation. With respect, Judge, we come from different backgrounds. I think there's some misunderstanding about how these events work. There it was again. That little poison some people pour into a sentence and call sophistication. Before I tell you what I did next, let me pause for a second and ask you something. Have you ever dealt with someone who thought rules were for other people? Someone who believed money made them weightless? If you have, leave me a comment because I do read them. And if this story is touching something in you the way it touched me, hit that like button for me. I have learned over the years that the most dangerous words in a courtroom are not always shouted. Sometimes they are polished. Sometimes they come in the shape of calm entitlement. Sometimes they arrive wearing a nice suit and a clean haircut and say, in effect, I should not have to answer to the same world as everyone else. I asked Christina for the supplemental file. She handed it up. There were more pages than I expected. That is never a good sign. I looked at Marcus again. Mr. Whitmore, do you have prior parking matters? Pembroke answered first. A few minor civil citations, Your Honor. I read from the sheet. 6 unpaid parking tickets in the last 4 months. 3 in posted emergency zones. 1 in a fire lane outside St. Anne's Urgent Care on August 22, 2025. 1 in a physician loading area on September 3, 2025. 1 in a handicapped access corridor on September 29, 2025. 2 expired meter matters. 1 no standing violation outside the Graduate Hotel. Marcus looked annoyed now, less amused. I said, that is not a misunderstanding. That is a pattern. Pembroke whispered something to him. Marcus shook his head and said out loud, they write tickets for everything in this city. That made a few people in the gallery shift. Working people know what tickets mean. They can mean groceries, medicine, a late fee, the electric bill. For him, they were paper flies. Then Christina leaned toward me and said quietly, "There's more." She handed up a memorandum from hospital administration logs. At 7:11 p.m. on the night of the incident, the event manager for the Whitmore Foundation donor reception had asked security not to tow the vehicle until family guests are notified. At 8:02 p.m., an administrator noted concern about relations with major donors. At 8:17 p.m., someone from the office of Senator Richard Whitmore called the hospital's external affairs desk. I looked up. The room had gone very still. Rita had not known all of that. I could see it on her face as Christina passed her a copy. Her jaw tightened, but she did not speak. That is another mark of dignity. Not every truth needs a performance. I asked Marcus, "Did you request that your family contacts intervene?" He spread his hands. "I don't control who makes calls." "That was not my question." He glanced at Pembroke. Pembroke said, "Your Honor, I would caution against turning a civil citation hearing into speculation about unrelated communications." I said, "When powerful people start making calls to smooth over consequences, that becomes very related." One of the handlers in the gallery stopped typing on his phone. The woman in pearls looked at the floor. Then came the next layer. The bailiff, Officer Martin Hale, brought in a packet from hospital security. Photos from the bay. Timestamps: 6:12 p.m., 7:06 p.m., 8:14 p.m., 9:39 p.m. Same car, same smug angle in the red stripes. Hazard lights off. No driver nearby. One of the photos showed EMTs pushing a gurney wide around the rear bumper. Another showed an ambulance's rear doors open into too narrow a path. These were not abstract papers anymore. They were a visual map of selfishness. Marcus stopped, leaning back. He leaned forward now, elbows on knees, jaw tight. Pembroke whispered urgently. I could not hear the words, but I know that posture. That is the posture of a lawyer realizing his client has spent too many years being protected from himself. I asked Rita, "Did the incident affect your work after that night?" She answered softly, "Yes, Your Honor. I did not sleep much after. I kept replaying the patient transfer. I kept thinking, what if Mr. Donnelly had died? How would I explain to his daughter that we lost time because somebody's sports car needed attention more than an ambulance?" My chest tightened again. There are moments in court when the law becomes almost secondary to the moral picture in front of you, not because law does not matter, it matters deeply, but because the law is often trying to protect exactly this, the dignity of people who carry the weight of society while others play on top of it. Then the thing happened that turned the case from ugly to unforgettable. At 11:18 a.m., Christina stood from her desk and walked toward me with a look I had seen maybe a dozen times in 23 years. It is the look that says, "Judge, you need to see this before the room does." In her hand was a printed screenshot and her own phone, locked on the same image. "Judge," she whispered, "hospital staff sent this over during the hearing. It was public this morning. Deleted at 10:58 a.m. I took the paper. I still remember the feeling in my fingers. It was like the room got smaller. The image was from Instagram. Account name, as Marcus Whitmore 3, posted to his story at 11:47 p.m. on October 11, 2025. The photo showed the bright orange Lamborghini Huracan parked exactly where Rita said it had been, red ambulance lane stripes visible under the rear wheel. In the frame you could see the emergency entrance sign. You could see one exhausted EMT in Navy uniform in the background with her head turned away. You could see a gift bag in the foreground and Marcus's watch hand holding a champagne flute. The caption read, "VIP parking. Relax. Whitmore means no one's towing this tonight." Family name. Move me, if you can. My first feeling was shock, not because rich young men boast, they do. Not because foolish people post their own evidence online, they do that too. No, what shocked me was the joy in it, the pride, the delight in stepping on people and then laughing where the whole world could see. I sat back and thought about my father again, about men who built things, men who got up at 4:30 a.m. to pour concrete so strangers could walk safely, Men who never had much but would rather lose a day's wages than block a fire lane. My father had rough hands and a clean conscience. This young man had soft hands and a poisonous spirit. I asked Christina to place the image on the courtroom monitor. When it came up on the screen, the room reacted all at once, a gasp from the back bench. One of the law students actually put a hand over her mouth. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God." Rita did not gasp. She just stared at the image. Then she blinked a few times very fast. I could see that she had not known he had turned her worst night into a joke. You want to understand what humiliation feels like? It is not just being harmed. It is discovering somebody enjoyed the harm. I looked at Marcus. The color in his face shifted a little. "Is that your account?" I asked. Pembroke moved first. "Your Honor, social media posts lack context. We would object to—" I cut him off. "Is that your account, Mr. Whitmore?" He sat still for a beat. "It's a joke." That is not an answer. He looked at the screen, then away. "Yes. Was that your caption?" "It was a story post. People say things online." "Did you write it?" He exhaled. "Yes." The room got even quieter, which I did not think was possible. I said, "So after ignoring repeated instructions to move your vehicle from an ambulance bay, you posted photographic proof of the violation and bragged that your family name would protect you?" Pembroke said, "Your Honor, the post was immature, yes, but not probative of the underlying—" "Counsel," I said, "it is highly probative of state of mind." Marcus shook his head. "I was drinking. It was sarcasm." "Did the ambulance bay find that funny?" He said nothing. "Did Ms. Alvarez?" Nothing. "Did Mr. Donnelly, the 78-year-old heart patient delayed at intake, find it funny?" Still nothing. At that moment I could see him doing what some defendants do when the evidence becomes larger than the self-story they brought into the room. He was trying to decide whether to keep playing arrogant or switch to scared. He had not practiced scared. It did not fit him well. I asked, "Do you work, Mr. Whitmore?" Pembroke stiffened. Marcus frowned. "I'm between opportunities." That phrase, I have heard many versions of it. Some are honest, some mean life knocked me down, and some mean I have never had to do anything I did not want to do. "How do you support yourself?" I asked. "My family helps." "How?" A pause. Pembroke said, "Your Honor, I fail to see the relevance." I said, "I see it clearly. Answer the question." Marcus finally said, "Trust distributions, some investment income." "How much?" He looked helplessly at Pembroke now. Pembroke said, "I would advise my client not to answer questions regarding broader financial matters." "Do you advise that because it is irrelevant?" I asked, "or because it is uncomfortable?" No answer. I returned to the file. The court notes 6 unpaid citations, repeated emergency zone parking, public boasting, and documented attempts by third parties to influence consequence. I'm now very interested in whether this is a one-off act of immaturity or part of a larger pattern of believing accountability is optional. He looked at me with that first flicker of real concern. Now here's the part that went viral. But stay with me because what came next was not the loudest moment. It was the clearest one. And before I tell you, I want to ask you this. What would you do in my seat? What would you say when a man has shown you, in public and in private, exactly what he thinks other people are worth? Drop a comment and tell me. I mean that. At 11:39 a.m., just as Pembroke was trying to steer the hearing back toward misunderstanding and resolution, Officer Hale approached the bench with a folded note. I opened it. It was from the courthouse liaison. Special Agent Elena Ramirez of the FBI Financial Crimes Division was in the building. She requested that the court be advised that Marcus Whitmore III was the subject of an active federal insurance fraud investigation involving staged luxury vehicle accidents, false loss claims, and suspected conspiracy crossing state lines between Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. There were pending developments. She would wait outside unless called. I felt a pulse in my temple. This was no longer just a story about a spoiled boy parking badly. It was a story about a pattern. A man trained by privilege to believe that systems exist to absorb his impulses, that other people handle the mess, that money patches the moral hole. I asked Pembroke, "Is your client currently under federal investigation?" He stood very still. Good lawyers know when the room is tilted. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I would ask that my client invoke his Fifth Amendment rights as to any questions that may touch on matters outside this citation." There it was. I looked at Marcus. "Do you understand why that concerns me?" He said, "My family's attorneys are dealing with that. Your family's attorneys. Not I am dealing with it. Not I'm innocent. Not here's what happened. My family's attorneys are dealing with it. Even his trouble had employees." I asked one more question. "Were any of the 6 unpaid tickets associated with vehicles later reported damaged, stolen, or involved in insurance claims?" Pembroke immediately said, "Fifth." Marcus stared at the table. The gallery reacted in small ways. A woman leaned back hard. Someone whispered. Rita did not move. I think at that point she understood what many working people understand early in life. The smaller insult is often attached to a bigger rot. Christina handed me another document. This one came from Hospital Administration, time-stamped Monday, October 13th, 2025, 2:23 p.m. It recorded that a representative from the Whitmore Family Foundation had discussed a possible $40,000 equipment support donation, conditioned on the matter being handled quietly and without media escalation. There was also an email summary stating that Rita Alvarez had been encouraged by an administrator to consider whether pressing the complaint was worth the stress. That line made my stomach turn. I looked at Rita. "Were you pressured to drop this?" She did not want to answer. Then she nodded once. "By whom?" "I'd rather not name them, Your Honor. They were trying to protect the hospital." I said softly, "And who was protecting you?" That is when her eyes filled. She did not cry. She just held the tears there because she had held so much else. I turned back to Marcus. "Do you believe you did anything wrong?" He answered too fast. "I parked badly, that's all." "You blocked emergency access. No one died. That is your standard." He sat up straighter, maybe trying to recover his old posture. "Look, with respect, this is turning into class warfare." I said, "No, this is turning into accountability." He let out a sharp laugh. Actual laughter. Then he said the sentence I will never forget. "We are not equal in any meaningful way, Judge. She's some EMT worker. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm saying we come from different worlds. That's reality." For one full second, nobody breathed. Then the courtroom erupted. A gasp from every side. One of the off-duty officers muttered, "Jesus." Pembroke closed his eyes and put his head in his hand. Rita froze as if the words had crossed the room and struck her in the chest. Christina looked at me because she knew my blood pressure had just ticked up. She knew I needed a second. I had to take a moment. I literally leaned back in my chair and put both hands flat on the bench to ground myself. A judge cannot explode, not even when a person in front of him richly deserves it. But I will tell you honestly, I felt anger, real anger, not the theatrical kind, the old righteous kind that rises when a decent person is mocked by somebody who has done nothing worthy in his whole pampered life. I thought about Rita's wrinkled uniform. I thought about her husband dying. I thought about 3 children. I thought about her less than 90 minutes of sleep in a car before court. I thought about her carrying strangers on stretchers while this young man carried gift bags. I thought about the old heart patient. I thought about my father. And then I knew exactly what needed to be said. I leaned forward. My voice was calm. That made it stronger. "Mr. Whitmore, you're right." His lawyer looked up fast. Marcus blinked. "You're right," I repeated. "You are not equal." The room held still. "You are not equal because Ms. Rita Alvarez has spent 23 years serving this city. She has worked nights, weekends, holidays, storms, overdoses, crashes, heart attacks, panic, blood, grief, and chaos, so that strangers could have another morning. She buried her husband after cancer. She is still paying the bills that death left behind. She is raising 3 children. She came into this courtroom alone after almost no sleep in a wrinkled uniform and told the truth with dignity. She is worth 10 of you." A sound moved through the room, not loud, more like relief. I kept going. You wear a $15,000 Brioni suit, you wear Gucci loafers, you wear a $60,000 Patek Philippe watch, you carry a Louis Vuitton briefcase. You drive a bright orange Lamborghini Huracan and call it inconvenience when people ask you not to block an ambulance bay. You have 6 unpaid tickets in 4 months, 3 in emergency zones. You invoke family money, family attorneys, family name, and family influence every time consequence comes near. You are under federal scrutiny for insurance fraud. And yet the thing I find lowest about you today is not the money, not the car, not the lies. It is that you looked at a working woman who saves lives and called her a nobody. Marcus's face had gone pale now. Not pink. Pale. I heard my father's voice in my head. When you have power over people, that's when your character is tested. So I said it aloud. When you have power over people, Mr. Whitmore, that is when your character is tested. Not when you are winning, not when the room loves you, not when your last name gets you out of trouble. Character is tested when you can make someone feel small and choose not to. You failed that test completely. I turned to the room for a second, then back to him. In this courtroom, everyone is equal under the law, but equal treatment does not mean I close my eyes to character. The law is not blind to conduct. The law is not deaf to contempt, and this court will not be rented by privilege. If you believe in accountability, if you believe money should never place anybody above the rules the rest of us live by, then subscribe to this channel and ring that bell. Like this video too. Let's show people that justice still matters, and share this story with somebody who needs to hear it, because too many decent people have been treated like they should just swallow disrespect and move on. Then I pronounced sentence. First, I imposed the standard statutory fine of $500 for the primary emergency access violation. Not because that was enough, it was not, but because the law begins where the statute begins. Second, for the documented pattern of conduct, I ordered 200 hours of community service to be completed over no more than 6 months at Rhode Island Hospital Emergency Department support operations, subject to lawful administrative approval. I specified exactly what that meant. Not office work, not fundraising, not smiling for pictures in a donated polo shirt, real support work, mopping floors, sanitizing transport chairs, restocking linens, emptying trash, emptying bedpans if assigned, taking instructions from the department he disrespected, learning the smell, pace, noise, and weight of the place he treated like a private driveway. Third, I suspended his driver's license for 6 months. During that time, I said, you will use public transportation, rideshare at your own expense or your own 2 feet. You will stand where ordinary people stand. You will wait where ordinary people wait. Fourth, I ordered a handwritten apology letter of no less than 1 full page to Rita Alvarez. Not typed, handwritten, because the hand slows the mind down, and sometimes slowing down is the first step toward shame. Fifth, I ordered that he read that apology aloud in person before Ms. Alvarez and any emergency department staff who wished to attend. Public words had done harm. Public words would now attempt repair. Sixth, I ordered a public post from his verified Instagram account explaining what he had done, what sentence had been imposed, and apologizing to hospital staff, first responders, and the public. That post would remain visible for 1 full year. If arrogance can live online, so can accountability. Seventh, I ordered a $50,000 donation, no strings attached, to the Emergency Patient Assistance Fund at Rhode Island Hospital, and an additional $50,000 personal match from Marcus Whitmore himself, paid over 12 months in equal installments from his own distributions or lawful income. Miss one payment, I said, and the community service doubles from 200 hours to 400. By then, the room was fully awake in that deep way a courtroom wakes up when it knows history is being made inside 4 modest walls. Marcus finally found his voice. You can't be serious. I am entirely serious, I said. Pembroke began, Your Honor, this is highly unusual. So is parking in an ambulance bay for 4 hours and posting about it on Instagram. Then I brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. And right then, as if the morning had been waiting for the perfect line to land before turning one more page, the courtroom doors opened. Officer Hale looked back. A woman in a cream pantsuit stood in the doorway with a face like polished stone. Beside her stood Special Agent Elena Ramirez from the FBI Financial Crimes Division, dark suit, federal badge visible, expression professional and unreadable. I learned later the woman was Catherine Whitmore, Marcus's mother, 61 years old, chair of 2 charity boards, very practiced in public composure. But in that moment, what I saw first was disgust. Agent Ramirez stepped forward. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I need to place a notice on the record that Mr. Marcus Whitmore III is required to surrender his passport by 5 p.m. today, pursuant to a federal financial crimes proceeding filed this morning in the District of Rhode Island. The room reacted all over again. Marcus turned in his seat so fast he almost knocked his briefcase over. What? Ramirez did not blink. Your counsel has been notified. Pembroke's face told me he had known something was coming, but not that it would arrive in my courtroom like a thunderclap. Then Catherine Whitmore spoke, not softly, not with family protection, with fury. You parked in an ambulance bay and posted about it on Instagram, she said. Are you actually stupid? Marcus stared at her. Mom, do not mom me in public after this. That line almost brought the place apart. She looked at the screen where the Instagram post still sat frozen, then at Rita, then back at her son with something colder than anger, shame, the kind, powerful families fear most. Not moral shame, social shame. Still, in that moment, it worked against him, and I was not about to pretend otherwise. She said, Your uncle is not making one more phone call for you. Do you understand me? Not one. Marcus's whole body changed. The swagger drained out of him like somebody had pulled a plug. His shoulders lowered, his mouth parted slightly. The color left his face until even his expensive haircut looked silly on him. That is what consequence looks like when it finally lands on a person who has spent his life outrunning it. He looked young then, not in the innocent way, in the unfinished way. Agent Ramirez placed an envelope with court staff. We will coordinate with defense counsel. Thank you, Your Honor. I nodded once. She stepped aside. Then I turned back to Rita. Ms. Alvarez, I said, you did not have to show up today. You could have let this go. You could have decided that fatigue, grief, bills, children, and pressure made this one more burden too heavy to carry. But you came anyway. She stood there holding that folder like she had held it all morning. I said, I want Mr. Whitmore to look at you. He did, but only because I made him. I want you to think very carefully about what real courage looks like, I told him. It looks like her. It does not look like you. Rita gave the smallest smile then, not victory, not gloating, just dignity. A human being refusing to be reduced by someone smaller than she was. The case concluded. People began to stand. The room buzzed with that electric mix of shock and satisfaction you cannot manufacture. But before Rita stepped away, I lowered my voice and said something just for her. You didn't need me to give you your dignity, I said. You had already won that before you walked in. That was the first time tears actually slipped from her eyes. Court kept moving after that because it has to. That is another truth people forget. Even after a remarkable moment, the next case is waiting. A registration lapse, a speeding citation, life continues. But I will tell you plainly, the air in courtroom 3B was different for the rest of the day. People sat straighter, lawyers chose their words more carefully. A few defendants looked at the bench with a kind of hope I recognized, not hope that they would get off easy. Better than that, hope that they would be seen fairly. I finished the docket a little after 2:40 p.m. By then my voice felt worn in the good way, the way it does after a day that mattered. Christina closed the last file and said, That one's not going away. No, I said, it shouldn't. On the drive home, the rain had stopped. Puddles held strips of late light between buildings. I remember turning onto my street and sitting in the car for a full minute before going in. Sometimes I do that after hard days. I let the silence settle. I think about whether I got it right. A judge should always ask himself that, not because doubt is weakness, but because certainty without reflection is dangerous. Joyce was in the kitchen again when I got home around 5:58 p.m. She had soup on the stove, chicken, lemon, a little rice. The house smelled warm, safe, human. I took off my jacket and sat down at the table. She looked at my face for half a second and said, "What happened?" So I told her, not every detail, not the whole record, but enough. The woman, the bay, the post, the insult, the sentence, the mother, the FBI. Joyce listened with her hands around a mug of tea. When I finished, she said, "Good." I laughed a little. "That's all?" She nodded. "Good. Some people need mercy. Some people need a mirror. Sounds like you gave him both." That stayed with me too. You know what I have learned from being married nearly half a century? The wisest people often say the most with the fewest words. I told her I kept thinking about Rita, about how tired she looked, about how hard it must have been to show up and speak while richer people tried to make her feel inconvenient. Joyce said, "People like her keep the world standing up. Don't ever forget that." As if I could. That night I thought about other cases. The man who stole diapers because his granddaughter had been left with him and he had no money. The teenage girl whose parking tickets piled up because she was living in her car after her mother relapsed. The nurse who cried in front of me because she got a citation while running to a code blue. Those cases require mercy. They ask the court to understand burden. But then there are other cases, cases where the law is not facing weakness, it is facing contempt. Mercy does not mean pretending those are the same. Equal justice is not identical treatment, it is wise treatment, honest treatment, treatment that sees the whole picture. 3 weeks later, on Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, Christina brought me a letter in a plain white envelope postmarked Providence, handwritten address, blue ink. I opened it between cases. It was from Rita. The first line read, "Dear Judge Caprio, thank you for seeing me as a person and not just a case number." I had to stop there for a second. She wrote that after the hearing, several younger EMTs told her they felt stronger just watching someone in authority say out loud that her work mattered. She wrote that her daughter Lucia had watched the clip online and cried because, for once, somebody important talked to Mom like she was important too. She wrote that she had almost dropped the complaint after being told it might create problems. She wrote, "You gave me back some faith I didn't know I had lost." I have received many letters over the years, some thankful, some angry, some confused, a few beautiful. I keep the meaningful ones in the top right drawer of my desk under old family photos and a prayer card. That letter went there. The part that moved me most was near the end. She wrote, "Some days are still very hard. Grief does not keep office hours, but I am finding my way. And what happened in your courtroom reminded me that dignity is still real if we are brave enough to insist on it." I sat there with the letter in my hand and felt my eyes sting. At 82, you do not cry because you are fragile. You cry because enough life has passed through you that truth reaches the center faster. Then 6 months later, on April 21st, 2026, I saw Rita again by chance at Dave's Fresh Marketplace on West River Street. I was there for tomatoes, bread, and the kind of olive oil Joyce says I always overpay for. I was near the produce section when I heard, "Judge?" I turned. There she was. And she looked different, not magically healed. Life is not a movie, but lighter. The dark circles were softer. She was wearing jeans, sneakers, and a gray sweater. Her hair was down. She still looked like a working woman. Thank God for that. But some of the weight had shifted. We spoke right there by the oranges. She told me she was back to full shifts. Sophia had started a part-time job at a dental office. Daniel made varsity soccer. Lucia was still quiet, but laughing more. Rita had joined a grief support group at St. Joseph's Parish Hall on Thursdays, and then she told me something I will never forget. She said, "I started volunteering on my one free Sunday a month with new widows from the hospital staff, mostly nurses, techs, aides, people who don't know how they're going to keep going. I figured if I could help someone else the way you helped me, I should." There it was, the ripple. She went on to tell me that a few emergency staff members had begun putting together a small fund in memory of her husband, Miguel Alvarez, to help hospital workers with emergency grocery cards, child care, and transit costs after family loss. "It's not huge," she said, smiling a little, "but it's real." I remember leaning on my shopping cart and thinking, This is why discretion matters. This is why seeing people matters. A cold decision ends at the file. A wise one keeps walking through the world long after the folder closes. I asked about Marcus, too, not because I was curious in a gossipy way, because follow-through matters. She said he had done the service hours, every last one, slowly at first, sullenly from what she heard. But he did them. He mopped, he stocked, he scrubbed, he cleaned bodily waste more than once. The department did not abuse him. That was important to me. Consequence should be dignified too. But they did not protect him from the work. And he read the apology aloud. Rita told me his hands shook while he read it. She said some staff accepted it and some did not. That also seemed right. Later that year, in September 2026, I was invited to speak at a judicial conference in Newport for younger judges and magistrates, Rhode Island Bar Association Service Panel, topic, Discretion, Dignity, and the Human Purpose of Lower Courts. Usually those panels are worthy and dry at the same time. I decided I would not let this one be dry. With Rita's permission, I told the story. I changed only the details that needed changing for pending matters, but the heart of it stayed the same. I talked about the temptation in modern systems to become rigid, to say rules are rules and let that end the conversation. But rules serve people. People do not serve rules. If a judge forgets that, he becomes a machine in a robe. I told them about the wrinkled uniform, the coffee stain, the 4 hours and 17 minutes, the 11:47 p.m. Instagram post, the sentence, "We are not equal in any meaningful way." I told them what I said back. Then we opened discussion. A younger judge from Connecticut said, "Aren't you worried that visible moral language from the bench looks subjective?" I said, "Justice is not the absence of moral language. It is the disciplined use of it." Another judge from Massachusetts shared a story about dismissing fines for a school cafeteria worker who had parked illegally while taking her diabetic grandson to treatment. A woman judge from New Jersey spoke about a construction laborer who kept missing court because he was caring for a brother with dementia. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not about being soft, about being wise, about how discretion used properly can humanize institutions that otherwise grind people down. That conference led to more invitations, more conversations. A small movement, if you want to call it that, around treating low-level courts as places of moral seriousness rather than administrative disposal. I trained younger judges for years. That fall, I told them again what my father told me. When you have power, use it wisely, use it with mercy. And Marcus, his story kept moving too. In December 2026, he entered a federal guilty plea in a luxury vehicle insurance fraud conspiracy, staged collisions, inflated claims, coordinated repairs, false theft reports. He served time, not forever, but enough to mark the record and perhaps, I hope, to interrupt the lie he had been living in. I do not celebrate prison. I never have. But I do believe some people need consequences strong enough to break through layers of arrogance before change can begin. What I am proudest of after all these years is not the famous cases or the viral moments. It is not the clips people share or the lines they quote back to me in airports and grocery stores. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in equal justice tempered with mercy the way I do, then do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Turn on that bell icon. Share this video with a police officer, a nurse, a teacher, a parent, a first responder, or somebody going through a hard season who needs to hear that dignity still matters. And leave me a comment about a time when someone in authority either lifted you up or let you down. I read more of them than you might think. And check out the next video on your screen because I have another courtroom story that will stay with you for a long time. I'm Frank Caprio. I've been on this bench for 40 years because I believe something simple. We are all equal before the law, and justice without mercy is not really justice at all. God bless you. Take care of each other. Show kindness whenever you can. And remember this, respect costs nothing, but it's worth everything.